Hi, this is Janice Walt Grenadier with judicialpedia.com. Today is May 16th, 2024, and we're here today with Stewart Handte and Angelique Fawcette. And Angelique has been actively involved in the guardianship debacle in our country, and Stewart, unfortunately, has been a victim of it. And Angelique also has had her share of being a victim of it, but is also a filmmaker and has been talking to different victims. And so she's going to be helping with interviewing Stewart. And Angelique, why don't you tell us a little bit more of your involvement with Stewart?
Well, thank you so much for having us. I'm so proud of Judicialpedia and what Judicialpedia is doing. And I'm sorry if you see my dogs in the background. There's a lot to say. You know, we're all in this really terrible situation together. And even in the terrible, you meet people such as Stewart, you, and Janice, yourself, and we wouldn't have met each other in any other way. It's not a good way to meet when our elderly people, our loved ones, are getting killed in abusive conservatorships and guardianships across the nation. But I have to say that I thank God that I've met both of you. And I thank God that Stewart, you and I have connected in this manner. And I love you to pieces, such as many of us love you to pieces. The hell that you have gone through is beyond extreme. And no one should ever have to go through it. The hell that Susan Hilligus had to go through, beyond extreme, as well as the hell that Roger Hilligus had to go through is beyond extreme. I just have to say that. But Stewart and I met. Ali Carino actually got in touch with me through my organization, Elderly Lives Matter USA. And then she wrote me another email and we finally connected, and she told me about Roger Hilligus and she told me about Stewart. And that's basically how we met. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we got on a Zoom call, myself, Stewart, Bob Gettinger from Ugly Judge and Court Victim, and we just started to talk. You know, as many of you know, this is Sheriff Stewart, and Bob Gettinger was also an ex-police officer. So we had a lot to talk about, along with my background with the police. So that's how we began talking. And it was heartbreaking to hear, I mean, first off, of what happened to Mrs. Hilligus and Roger, but to see that Stewart gave his life and his heart to care and do the right thing, to do what he's been doing for 30 years, to be who you are, Stewart, a sheriff helping people, and then to get persecuted for it was just, it's ridiculous. So that's how we met.
So Stewart's story starts with his mother and in trying to help her, and then moves into a situation with a friend, Roger Hilligus, with his mother, and being a sheriff. And one of the things a lot of people don't understand in the United States is our sheriffs are the highest power we have of policing. Our sheriffs have more power than our judges. Unfortunately, a lot of our sheriffs don't understand that, and we could turn things around a little bit with that. But Stewart, why don't you start in and tell us a little bit about what happened with your mother and how this has then kind of morphed into helping Roger and his mother.
Thank you very much, Janice. First of all, I want to thank Judicialpedia, as Angelique most proficiently stated, for allowing myself to have the platform here to speak the truths of what happened. I equate the both of you to a very famous lady named Joan of Arc. And Joan of Arc was a patriot, and she was a go-getter, and she was a person who stood up for her values and morals. And I'm a history buff, so I know a little bit about Joan of Arc. And both of you ladies have gone through hell and high water. The reason you're here today, and the reason I'm here, is because of God. I'm a God-fearing man, as both of you are God-fearing women. And if it wasn't for God, none of us would be here. I was a sheriff. I was 2 tribal chiefs of police. Most of my career was as a state trooper with the Nevada Highway Patrol. And I did a lot of things for the good of the people here in this the state of Nevada and in the community of Reno and Sparks, where I spent most of my career. And I'm proud of that. And I've always stood up against the corruption that's taken place and continues to take place, not only here in Nevada or California or New York, but across the country. And we're seeing it now on the national level with our president being persecuted maliciously and prosecuted maliciously in the state of New York. As for my mother and I started taking care of her after my father died. My father died October 21st of 2006. And I sent my mother back east to visit her sister, her only sister, to get her away from the tragedy of losing her husband of 48 years. Unfortunately, my relatives in Vermont had different designs on my mother and were able to get into finances because my mother had started to suffer the onset of dementia. And they stole over $48,000 from my mother and I, money that I was there to take care of my mom. So I was not working at the time, and I got my job back as a deputy sheriff with Story County Sheriff's Office. And I was preparing for my mother to come back after a 2-week stay in Vermont, my home state, and Virginia's my hometown. That 2-week stay turned into over 4.5 months, where they got into the finances, they stole the money, and they tried to keep my mom in Vermont and make her a resident there. The only thing I say for my mom is for my mother, is she had the fortitude and the strength and determination at that point to say she wanted to come back to Reno to be with me and her pets and the house that she was in for so many decades. So finally, after 4.5 months, I got my mom back. Yeah, there was starting to see some deterioration of her cognitive skills. Sometimes it's tough to talk about my mom. She was a go-getter. She was a fire plug. She was like the Tasmanian devil reincarnated, so to speak. But to see her starting to slip and fall with her cognitive abilities was tough. She had suffered a traumatic brain injury, as Roger Hilligus had, 3 of them apparently, in 2005. And my dad spent every waking hour of his deteriorating health life caring for my mom, hook, line, and sinker. And of course, that ultimately caused his death. His health was just that bad. So I began to care for my mother, and I had moved up to Northern California to be with my then fiance, who subsequently parted company. My mom didn't want to live up there. She wanted to live in her house, just like Susan Hilligus wanted to live in her house. I was able to have my mom live in her house. However, as time went by, I had to quit my full-time job as the deputy sheriff of Story County Sheriff's Office because of corruption, and I won't get into that. I'm just going to leave it there. I cared for my mother morning,
I'm
noon, and
just going
night.
to mention one thing with that is that you are a whistleblower.
Yes, ma'am. I'm a
And
former whistleblower.
that takes a lot out of us to begin with. And then to be as giving as you are trying to take care of these 2 women, as well as at the same point being a whistleblower within your job. And I just want to give you those kudos because that's very tough to do.
Thank you.
So,
And
go on.
I was a former federal whistleblower when I was a state trooper with the Nevada Highway Patrol, which is now defunct. And I was threatened with my career in of all days, 9/11 of 2001, by the head of the Department of Public Safety at the time, Richard Kirkland, who basically declared war on me. I firmly believe to this day that he is behind some of the atrocities that befell me from August of 2019 till current date.
Who was that again?
Richard Calvin Kirkland,
Richard.
former chief
And
of police.
is he in the a legislature? Is he a judge? No. Is he a
He was a former chief of police of the Reno Police Department.
Okay.
He was a former sheriff of Washington County Sheriff's Office, and he was a former director of Department of Public Safety. He was subsequently fired because of the efforts, not of just myself, but a group of people who had the fortitude to stand behind me as the federal whistleblower and provide evidence to the United States Department of Defense, who sent an inspector general out to do an investigation named as Dwayne Bradley. And Dwayne Bradley compiled a very in-depth investigation that led to Kirkland being drawn into the governor's office at the time, Kenny Gwynn, along with former governor and former attorney general at the time, Brian Sandoval, where Mr. Kirkland was subsequently given his walking papers. He was fired, not as the media reported that he retired, he was fired. And I believe because of that, he lost his aspirations to go on to the next part of his career, which would have been political office. Why anybody wants to get in politics these days is beyond me.
Well,
But
you know
with
what?
my
God
mother,
bless the few who do that are good people.
yeah, I agree. So with my mother, um, she was going in and out of the hospital and then going into rehab because she was having reoccurring UTIs. Janice, I was doing my best to keep her healthy, but it was like opening your hand with a handful of sand and just letting it filter through, was watching my mom's life slip away. And subsequently, when it came down to the time in my life where I realized my mom was not going to be around much longer, the assisted care facility, and I'll name it, Manor Care in South Reno, tried to keep her there. And I uncorked on them. And I said, "You're not keeping her here." There were some unpleasantries exchanged. And I took my mom home, where 2 weeks later, listening to some of her favorite music from Glenn Miller, the Beach Boys, John Denver, and Jim Croce, she opened her eyes, looked at me, looked in the corner of the wall, in the corner of her bedroom, and carefully and peacefully passed away. That was January 11th of 2009. So I do have a little bit of, thank you. And condolences to all of our parents who've passed before us and they're not witnessing this atrocities that take place in this country right now. I'm glad they're not. For Roger Hilligus, I have been let go from my last law enforcement job in the state of Nevada, which is chief of police for the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. And I was trying to find out if I could get my job back through legal recourses when I met Roger, just coincidental meeting at an attorney's office in Reno. And he and I began a conversation. We first initially talked about him getting a traffic ticket in Story County. And since I'd worked up there, I said, "Just pay it, Roger. It's not worth your time to go up there and fight it." He wanted to fight it. I think he did. He lost. But then he started talking to me about his mother and her situation. And he began describing what was taking place. And I go, "Well, God, haven't you gone to see anybody about this? I mean, what you're describing to me is abuse and neglect of your mother." And we never really get into the nuts and bolts way backwards where it all started. But I basically told him, I go, "Look, Roger, I can't do anything because, first of all, I'm not law enforcement. And if I had been in law enforcement at the time, Janice, I would have had to conflict myself out." So I called up who I used to think was my friend, the chief of the Reno Police Department, Jason Soto, and asked him to meet with Roger because Roger had evidence. He showed me pictures of his mother with a black eye. He showed me pictures of mother in disheveled clothing. Her hair was unkempt. And here was a very prim and proper lady who prided herself on her appearance. She was a member of the White Hats, which is a very exclusive part of the Reno Rodeo Association. And that Reno Rodeo has been in Reno for many, many decades. It's a big event. It's one of the biggest events to draw people in throughout the course of the year. In fact, it's coming up in June here. So she was part of an exclusive club, her and her husband, Gene. Gene had passed away earlier. So Roger was showing me this stuff. I go, "Well, look, I'll call up Jason Soto." And I did. And I left a voice message on his cell phone. And I got a phone call back from Oliver Miller, who said, "Well, what do you want us to do, Stu?" I go, "Ollie," again, I thought these guys were my friends. They were not. Just sit down with the man. He's got evidence to show you of abuse and neglect. And that's part of your job, is to investigate this. And it's in your wheelhouse. So would you please sit down with him and do me that favor? That's all I want. And I'm out. So Roger and the third person, Tracy Griffith, went down to the Reno Police Department on August 8th, 2019, and met with not Commander Oliver Miller, but with Sergeant Rob Hannafin, who basically told him, "Look, it's a civil matter. We're not getting involved, but you should go up there and try and mediate it. And if they let your mom out, then take her." Pretty much words to that effect. And that's exactly what happened on August the 8th of 2019, when Roger and Tracy and I, the three of us, were there at the facility. We signed in with our names, Stu and Gus, Gus being a nickname for Roger Hill. Gus, very well-known nickname. Stu for short for Stewart, to see Susie. Why we wrote down Susie is because Roger said his mom always liked to be called Susie because it made her feel young again. Now we're talking about a lady who's in her 80s. We walked in the facility. We presented the paper. Roger presented the paperwork. I just sat there, and this man took Roger down the hallway to see his mother. And about 5 minutes later, Roger and his mother reappeared. The smile on her face was priceless. She was looking
Did
at her
she have a
son.
suitcase with her or any
He did
type
not.
of?
Nope.
So
He
he didn't take any of her things as if
Nope.
he was taking her. Okay.
No. And there was nothing that prevented him from taking her. There was no legal framework that prevented him from taking her out of that facility. In fact, the people there waved goodbye. And, you know, I again, you know, there was questions of her cognitive ability. Again, I watched my mom go through all 7 stages of dementia. And at the end, she could not talk. She barely recognized me. But yet I was still there for her, and I loved her. And I took care of her because that's what loving children are supposed to do for their parents at the end stages of their lives. So I asked, I said, ma'am,
Angelique,
do you
you
know?
also know this story well, so if you want to interject anything, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you. You go ahead, Stewart. Thank you.
Okay,
Your mid
so
thought.
the bottom line was, hang on just a second. I just have to let some. I'm okay, thank you. I just gotta let my roommates know they always make dinner for me. So, and you can cut this out. But so I asked, I go, ma'am, do you know who I am? And she looked at me. She goes, no. Are you one of Roger's friends? I go, yes. I says, my name is Stewart. I says, do you know who this man is right here holding your arm? She goes, well, that's my son. Like, duh, you dummy. And I said, looked at Roger and I smiled. He looked at his mom verbatim. Mom, do you want me to get you out? Do you want me to get you out of here? And she says, yes, please, with a tone of exasperation like nobody's business. So we walked out the front door. We casually walked across the parking lot. We walked across a very busy street, 4 lanes of traffic. Roger walked his mother to his car. She got in. This has always been tough for me because it's a haunting memory that I can't get out of my mind. And I stood by the passenger door and she was putting her seatbelt on. She looked at me and she said, goodbye. No, bye. For her. I never saw her again. I subsequently learned she had passed away on October 16th of 2019 after the nightmare that unfolded on both Roger's and my lives, starting the evening of August 8th when I was called by Commander Oliver Miller saying, you know where Roger Hilligus is? I believe you took his mom home. Why? What are you calling me for, Ollie? He goes, well, were you with him today? I go, yes, I was. He goes, well, you were there when he kidnapped his mother. I go, but wait a minute. I go, stop. I said, do you just hear what you just said? He kidnapped his mother? I said, how stupid does that sound? He goes, well, Stu, he didn't have permission to take her. I go, really? I said, wait a minute. He didn't have permission to take her, but yet I was told that your members of your department, a Sergeant Hannafin, told him to go up there with the paperwork, and if they let his mother out, then so be it. Well, he didn't have permission to take her. I go, you're not answering my question, Ollie. He goes, this is going to be bad. He goes, I'm just telling you right now, this is going to turn into a big investigation. I go, fine, I didn't do anything wrong. And the conversation ended. A couple days later, well, actually, the following day, I didn't know if I'd been hornswoggled by this gentleman by the name of Roger Hilligus. So I called up the Reno Police Department hotline and said, I think Roger may have taken his mom to Southern California because he mentioned when in our prior meetings that his mother had a brother that lived in Southern California. This was Saturday.
Now, how far is that of a drive from where you all live?
8 to 10 hours.
Oh, so it's not too far.
Yeah, 8 to 10 hours. So, anyways, I left that Saturday. Then I get a phone call Monday that 2 detectives want to interview me. The interview took place beginning at my house and then subsequently went to a coffee shop because another part of this interview that's tough for me to say, I didn't tell my wife what was going on, although the evening of the 8th and the morning after and the entire day, the top story in Reno was Roger Hilligus kidnapping his mom, accompanied by another person. That other person was me. And Sherry, my ex-wife now, said, well, that guy was at her house. Were you involved in this? And I didn't tell the truth because I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. But it sure as hell turned into a big deal.
I have to just interject with this part, if you don't mind. I think one of the saddest parts about what's going on in our nation is that you can get apprehended for supposedly Kidnapping your own mother? I mean, how do you do that? You know, your mother she's your mother or your father. You should have the right to remove them and take them wherever you want to be. If you know, if you haven't abused them, you haven't hurt them. And also if the elderly person has asked to leave. That was the same thing with Nichelle. Nichelle was begging to get out of the rest home. And it sounds like it sounds like Susan Hilligus, from what you've told me all this time that we've known each other, Stewart, she wanted to get out of there. And she was so happy. She was so happy. So I'll let you, I don't want to, mess up your.
No, but I want everyone to understand also, Angelique, that you have been through this.
Yeah.
And that you did this for a close family friend as well, and that a mother figure to you for many, many years. And you were the one that basically had her back and was trying to make her final days in life just like Roger and Stewart were doing.
Yeah, and I think that's why, all of us connect, but, specifically Stewart and I, because we were helping someone that we loved. And, Nichelle Nichols was my second mother, and she suffered in an abusive conservatorship in the state of California. Yeah. And, it's all just really terrible and sad what we have to go through. And,
it's unbelievable.
And when people's human and civil rights are violated, if an elderly person says they want to live in a certain place, they want to go to a certain restaurant, they don't want to go to a rest home, they don't want their home sold, they don't want to be any place that they don't want to be, then their rights should be acknowledged. And here in regards to Stewart's case and Roger and Mrs. Hilligus, it's so simplistic. If a human being doesn't want to be in a particular location, their right is to be able to leave. And they should, the officers and law enforcement should ask the person, do you want to leave, Mrs. Hilligus? She would have said yes. And there was no question. I haven't heard from this story that anyone asked Mrs. Hilligus what she wanted at all. And here's her son and best friend trying to help her out.
The guardianship enterprise is one where judges and lawyers make so much money. It's kind of like the divorce enterprise. These lawyers and judges have this money machine going and gifting, and it's got to stop. It just has to. And thank God for the internet and our ability through different avenues to expose these people. So go ahead, Stewart. I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, Stewart.
No, Angelique. Both you ladies have suffered, and it would be selfish of me not to allow either one of you to interject here, because you have suffered more. My mom was able to pass in her own home. Roger's mom was not, and I did not know Roger's mom. I just briefly met her. But here's the kicker, and people got to understand this. This was reported to law enforcement, not just by Roger, but by myself as a retired 30-year law enforcement officer, where I said, I have seen the pictures of abuse. I have seen the pictures of neglect. Roger compounded that by saying every time he went to see his mother, she was in soiled diapers. I just had a coworker this weekend whose mother is in an assisted care facility here in Reno to take her out to Mother's Day dinner. When she and her sister arrived at the facility, her mother was in leggings that were totally brown from feces. And when my friend had pulled off the leggings, she said, I could not bear the sight of what I saw. She had obviously been in her soiled diaper for a number of days. It was that atrocious. These assisted care facilities are the Auschwitzes of modern day era. And I've been chastised by people for saying that, but I will continue to say that because I observed it firsthand with my mother, and I've observed it secondhand with Roger. A little sidebar story that took place as we were getting Susan Hilligus out of that deplorable facility, which, by the way, has been rated D consistently by NAFCARE and the Nevada Department of Public Health and Safety. D, as in a bad grade. We all know what a D grade is in school. That's what they're getting. When we walked through that secondary door, a lady came up and grabbed my arm. She goes, "Please get me out of here." She's crying. "Please get me out of here." I said, "Ma'am, I can't help you." She goes, "I'm not asking you to take me out of here. Just open the back door. I know where my home is." I said, "Ma'am, I barely got, ma'am, when two security people went and grabbed her, and she was screaming and crying." I never got a chance to say that because I never had the opportunity in court until on my sentencing hearing. Of course, they brought up and said, "Oh, he's fabricating this or fabricating that." Again, haunting memories, Mrs. Hilligus, that lady, not telling my wife at the time the truth. And what I'm about to tell you next was one of the worst episodes of my life. I interviewed with the detectives at my house. We moved to a coffee shop in Demonte Ranch Parkway, about half a mile from my house. They threatened to take my phone from me with force. I subsequently gave it to them because I had nothing to hide. I never have had anything to hide. I still don't have anything to hide.
Now, do you
And
have this phone back?
No, I filed a police report on theft of my phone. Nobody's gotten back to me. My phone has been subsequently, well, we don't have it. They don't have it. We don't have it. Who has it? Who has it? The fairy godmother? Who has my phone? I want my phone back. That's got precious picture memories on there of my pets who've gone over the Rainbow Bridge. I want my phone back. I want it back, and I'm going to get it back. I'm going to get it back with that concerted effort. So they took my phone. They said they would give it back to me the following day. Since I didn't have a phone, I had to manifest another fabrication to my wife that I lost my phone. And so following morning, I went down to the attorney's office where I first met Roger. And again, I didn't think this was a big deal, but it was about ready to turn into the nightmare of my life. I went down to the attorney's office and called Detective Allison Jenkins Klodowski, who it was Detective F. Javier Lopez were the ones who met me at the coffee shop. They're the ones who actually transported Roger back from California and violated all sorts of policy procedures there, but that's for Roger to discuss, not me. So I called her a couple of times to get my phone back. Well, we weren't satisfied with a voluntary consent, so we applied for a search warrant, and we're getting a search warrant. How long is this going to take? Because I want my phone back. I had to go to a job fair that afternoon to look for a job because I was unemployed at the time. I wanted to provide for my family, which I've always wanted to do. It's part of my mantra. And so I called her a second time, and she said, "Well, we got the search warrant. Now we're downloading the contents of the phone. It's going to take a couple hours." In actuality, it only takes 5 minutes. They were setting up the trap. The third time I called Detective Jenkins Klodowski from my lawyer's office, it went directly to voicemail. I go, "That's odd." About 15 minutes after that, I walked out to my car to get some paperwork out of my vehicle. It was parked in the attorney's parking lot. And I was taken down at gunpoint by 6 members of a tactical operations squad with their guns drawn on me, 4 in front, two to the rear. 2 in the rear didn't have the guns, 4 in the front did. Fingers in the trigger guard. And they were screaming at me, "Get on the ground, you mother blanker, screaming at me. The 2 guys that were coming up from behind were a lot quicker than the 4 coming at me from the front. And they grabbed my arms and pulled them up behind my back, popped my back. And I was trying to get out of it because I was in pain, instant pain. And they were screaming at me, "You keep twisting, you keep doing it, we'll take you to the ground. I don't care what kind." I was dressed up nice. I was in nice slacks and a polo shirt to go to my job fair. And then one guy got right in my face. He goes, "What the F's the matter with you, Stewart? You know effing better than this, you piece of effing blank." That's how I was treated as a 30-year member of law enforcement and a 48-year member of the Reno Sparks community by members of my own profession.
I'm very sorry you had to go through that. It's
you,
amazing the lack of
compassion.
just compassion that these men have.
It's almost been 5 years, and I'm not an emotional man. I'm not as stoic as my dad was, but sometimes things get to me, and you can tell when they do. I stop and try to regain my thoughts, and Angelique knows this. We've cried a few tears over the phone with each other, and we'll probably cry some more. So I was taken into custody, wasn't immediately transported to jail. I was taken down to the Reno Police Department and interrogated viciously by Detective Jenkins and another detective, Michael Barnes. And then they gave me my phone back to say, call Roger, see where he's at. I tried, couldn't get a hold of him. Well, call Tracy. They knew Tracy. But why wasn't Tracy arrested? Always an interesting question to this day.
I
Because he was
agree.
there. Yeah.
I agree. That was just weird.
What was the relationship with Tracy? Who exactly was she?
Tracy Griffith is a guy who was very good friends with Roger. And in fact, Tracy's family and Roger's family grew up together in the same community of Golden Valley, which is north of Reno. It's a suburb of Reno. So anyways, long story short, they asked me to call Tracy. I called Tracy, and Tracy didn't know where Roger was. And I go, look, I said, I've been cooperative here. And Detective Jenkins Klodowski goes, well, you've been very cooperative. We're going to recommend to the DA that, we'll release you and you go home and take care of stuff, which was a lie. About 15 minutes after, 20 minutes after that, she comes in and says, go ahead, stand up, put your hands behind your back. I go, what are you talking about? She goes, you're being transported to jail and booked. And I just felt my life just completely fall apart underneath me. I says, you just told me you recommended it. Well, the DA said no. So we're taking you to jail. And they took me to jail as a common criminal. And they took my mugshot. And by 11 o'clock that night, it was all over the local news. My former father-in-law in North Carolina saw it as a top story in his news channel there. A friend of mine who was vacationing in New York City saw it as one of the top 3 stories in New York City. In New York City, Janice.
You know what this reminds me of, and I'm active in this, is the January Sixers. It's like, let's warn everyone across the United States, if you stand up for your family, this is what's going to happen to you. If you try to take care of your parents and we say you don't have a right to take care of your parents, you too, this can happen. It was like they were making an example of you for their criminal guardianship enterprise.
And I go back to what I said a little bit earlier when we were discussing this. What does it take for so many law enforcement officers to lie in police reports? And there are many. What does it take for district attorney to lie in official court documents? What does it take for judicial magistrates, both in the Reno Justice Court and the Second Judicial District Court of Nevada, to violate civil rights, constitutional rights, rules of professional conduct, Nevada Supreme Court rules, just to get 2 guys who are innocent of kidnapping the second gentleman's mother, who, I don't want to say this with emphasis right now, who we have direct evidence that she was murdered. She was murdered for money. She was murdered to keep her mouth shut because she would have told the jury, had we gotten to that point, she would have told the jury that she wanted to be with her son, that she wanted to get out of there. She was being abused and neglected. She could talk. They lied about that, but they sure got her back to Reno. And what Angelique said earlier rings true. Nobody ever attempted to interview her. Nobody even talked to her. Now, since I have 30 years in law enforcement experience, I've dealt with some people who are not able to speak or get their thoughts across in an interview and interrogation process, but they use a proxy, another person to speak for them, and they nod, or they shake their head no, or they mumble some words that the proxy knows, or that they can write down stuff. She could write, probably. I didn't ask her if she could write, but I bet she could. Why wasn't any of that undertaken? And I will answer that question for you. Because it wasn't about violations of crime. It wasn't about kidnapping Roger's mother. It was about money, about $3 million worth of money, last I remember, from the Hillegas Estate Family and Trust. Money, and we got to keep Susan Hillegas from testifying on the stand. Now, when she was returned to Nevada, she went to a second home, assisted care facility. This I did not know until after she had passed. That second assisted care facility was owned, or still is owned, by a friend of mine that I've known since high school, since 1979. And I was supposed to go to lunch with him the week that I got fired as the chief of police at the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. And I didn't call him until almost Halloween, after Susan had passed. Not many people in this world call me Stewie, but he does. He goes, Stewie, what's going on, man? We're supposed to go let your names all over the media. I go, yeah, I know, Dave. I mean, I'm sorry. All hell's broken loose. He goes, you want to hear something really scary and crazy? I go, what? He goes, that lady, Susan Hilligus. I go, what about Susan Hilligus? Because she was at my facility. I go, what facility? He goes, I own Artesian Gardens assisted care facility. I go, you never told me that. He goes, no, it never came up in conversation. I go, well, then, Dave, how did she die? Oh, she didn't die here. I go, what do you mean she didn't die there? He goes, no, the daughter came in not long after she came here and said the rules were too restrictive and removed her to the third care facility, the season where she died 2 weeks later.
Oh my God.
That
Now,
is
is
circumstantial, if not direct evidence of a homicide.
yeah.
Yep.
That's what they did to shut that lady up, is murdered her. And there is a document that Matt Scarlatus has from the mortuary. That protocol that normally was followed was not followed. And as Susan Hilligus was immediately cremated, my mom was cremated. My mom did not have an autopsy because her death was anticipated. But what she did have was a toxicology report. And pretty much 9.99 times out of 10, there are always toxicology reports to see what level of drugs are in the system of those that are anticipated to be passing. Nothing took place with Susan Hilligus. Why? Why
The
wasn't she
majority-
interviewed?
Yeah, the majority of people, of elderly people who go through conservatorship and guardianship abuse are cremated.
Because they don't want the
It-
evidence, Angelique.
Exactly. They don't want the evidence shown. And then to add on to what you said, there's a whole lot of RICO violations going on when they use all of these people to hurt one person, whether it's the elderly or those standing up for the elderly.
And again,
Well, it's a mafia style money enterprise.
it's a criminal cabal.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a criminal. This is the modern day mafia. It involves the courts. It involves attorneys. It involves cops, federal, state, county, city, municipal, whatever. And, for Roger, and I got to go, I backtrack a little bit. This needs to get out. And it was never gotten out. And Roger didn't get a chance to say it in the sentencing, but I'm going to say it right now. When Roger's location was found, they deployed the entire Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office SWAT team on nothing more than lies perpetrated by Detective Jenkins Klodowski in the Reno Police Department, sent to the state of Nevada, where 5 protocol things have to be met for a silver alert. They disregarded all 5, and the silver alert went out that night, August 8th of 2019, and was continuing going on. Then all of a sudden, less than a week later, it was the silver alert was taken off, but Roger had not been found yet. They were zeroing in on him. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office SWAT team, the entire team was deployed. 2 helicopters in the air, the entire SWAT team deployed, shut down Bellflower Avenue, which is shutting down one of the interstates, from what I've been told, evacuated the apartment building, cordoned off the city block, and green-lighted him. Do you know what that means?
I don't.
Had Roger gone over to a window and presented a silhouette target, they had 2 snipers on the roof to shoot him and kill him for lies. Shoot him and kill him for lies of cops, for lies of the lawyers, district attorney's office, judges. Shoot and kill an innocent man who all he wanted to do was take his mother out of an abuse and neglect situation in a D-rated facility and care for her, not in her house anymore, because guess what? On August 8th, Judge Egan Walker, the Second Judicial District Court, authorized the sale of the house. Well, guess who was the listing and selling agent? Robin Renwick, Roger's sister. 3% on the front, 3% on the back. When I did my math, it turned out to be about $36,000. But who got the rest of the money? Because the house was paid off and it sold for about 460,000, maybe somewhere in that ballpark. Who got the money? And you just answered a little while ago, Angelique and Janice. Who got the money? You know who got the money.
The lawyers, the judges, the
Correct.
police, everybody got a little something.
Yep, a little something. Why? Because what's the price tag for cops lying? What's the price tag for attorneys lying in court documents? What's the price tag for judges violating people's constitutional civil rights? It's got to be pretty big. It's got to be a lot of favors being paid back there. And I'm
You
telling
know,
you right now,
yeah,
it's
it's amazing the amount of money. And I don't want to take this off of you, but just our police chief owns a $2.5 million home on the beach. North Carolina as a second home.
no,
So
it's corruption, and you're seeing it.
fast.
Yeah, it's corruption on all levels of the legal system. And I want to make sure I get this out before I lose my train of thought in this particular point.
Yeah, no, please do.
Our legal system needs to be disbanded. It needs to be totally disbanded, dismantled, whatever adjectives you want to use, and refurbished with people who have the rights of the citizens in mind, who understand what the laws are, who can apply the laws and not interpret the laws. And that's where we're at in there.
Well, you know, we have to look at what's in our toolbox. Our Constitution actually gives us all these rights. The problem is that we have ignored them for so long and been complicit that they expect us to be complicit. And now that we are all standing up and saying, okay, no more, they're being heavy.
You're absolutely correct.
They didn't expect they would get caught.
They didn't expect it, and now they're worried, and they should be worried because they're covering up murders. You both you ladies know that the worst case of guardian probate fraud has taken place in the great state of Nevada. April Parks. How many years did she serve in prison? Over 40. For basically stealing people's trust and estates and trust.
No, wait, she got charged with 40 years maybe, but she hasn't spent a day in jail, I don't think.
Oh no, she's in prison right now.
She's in jail.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she's in prison. Yeah, I've checked on that. Trust me, I've checked on that. And here's an eerily similar case that I want to make sure gets out too. I did in my sentencing. It's called the Rebecca Schultz case. It's out of Las Vegas. Last I checked, Las Vegas and Reno were in the same state of Nevada. Maybe my geography is off, Angelique. Maybe it's not, Janice. But Angelique and Janice, Rebecca Schultz was the lady whose father, Guadalupe Olivero, if I get the name right, I'm sure about that. But anyways, he was being abused and neglected by the guardian in his own home. She appealed to the court. The court basically said, too bad, so sad. Guardian's taking care of your dad. That's it. Bye-bye. So what she did, under the color of night, is whisked her father away out of his own home, took him down to Southern California. Doesn't that sound eerily reminiscent? And the courts found out and said, bring him back. She said, when pigs fly. And she never brought him back. There was no criminal charges against her. They leveled a civil contempt of court against her in civil and family court. And she laughed at it. She scoffed at it. The only difference is Guadalupe Olivero was in his own home. Susan Hilligus was in an assisted care facility. Roger's the guy. Rebecca's the girl. Roger took his mother to Southern California. Rebecca took her father to Southern California. They told Rebecca, bring him back. She didn't bring him back. Guadalupe Olivero got to spend the rest of his days with his daughter in Southern California. Roger, on the other hand, got to be taken out by aggressive force with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, taken back to Reno, arrested, convicted, blah, 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 spent 18 months in jail, and the top of the list, his mother was murdered. Now you tell me what's fair about that. Nothing. Not a damn thing.
It's all about the money.
It is. And
it's all about the money and keeping everybody into a box. And you were an example, just like the J6ers. If you do this, this is going to happen.
Correct.
And you know, a lot of people feel like January 6th, you know, they had a right to do that. I don't know. But I'm just saying, I've sat through a January 6th trial where the guy didn't go into the building. He didn't harm anybody. They had nothing on him, really. And the district attorney asked for 20 years and the judge gave him 15 years. And he has
that's it.
So
yeah.
It's, you know, so he did absolutely nothing, just like you did absolutely nothing. But you're the example, the poster boy for the guardianship. If you do this, you step over that boundary, this too could happen to you.
Yeah, and the losses, besides the murder of this beautiful lady, which is at the top of the list, the losses accrued by both Roger and I are the ultimate losses that anybody should accrue in life. I'm not going to play the pity card because what's water under the bridge is water under the bridge. But Roger and I both lost the loves of our lives. Both of us were divorced. Roger and his wife Debbie didn't have any children together, but she had children by previous marriage, and he considered those children to be his own. They disowned him. My daughters disowned me. I've only had one daughter from my first marriage. Lost the place I live. Roger lost the place he lived. Lost personal property. Roger lost personal property. We both lost. Some of which are gone over the Rainbow Bridge for me. And I don't know about Roger, but he lost his he had 3 dogs that just followed him around like nobody's business. Those losses would probably lead a normal person to call it a day. And I'm not being facetious here. But we've struggled and we persevered because of people such as Angelique, you, Matt Scarlatus, Ali Carino, Ivan Propansky in Ohio, Rick Black, Kathy Bossy, Mary Bush, and the list goes on. Besides God, God is at the top. But if it wasn't for people such as yourselves, I wouldn't be here today. And I want people to understand that if they can do this to 2 innocent men who all they want to do was get another beautiful lady out of an abuse and neglect situation. Roger being a former public servant as well, he drove a school bus for Washington County School District, as well as being a former crew boss from Nevada Division of Forestry as a firefighter. And me and my law enforcement career, over 60 plus years of public service, be treated as nothing more than scum, normal criminals that kidnapped this lady, had drug her across the street, that forced her into her car. This is stuff that's been testified to in reports, that whisked her away and basically kept her hiding before the cops came in and rescued this poor lady and took her back to Reno. But God, you know, she was old and she had dementia. Unfortunately, she just passed away. All lies. Nothing but lies. And at the center part of it all was Susan Hilligus, who only wanted to be with her son. Not the daughter, but the son. And why didn't she want to be with the daughter? Well, you already know the answer to that, both ladies. You know the answer because the money and the greed and the evil was pervasive behind the motivation of Robin Renwick to make sure her mother did not testify against her brother, who only hope was to get his mother back to a place where he could care for her and love her like any son should do for a mother, like I got to do with my mom. And that's the price. That's the price. That's the price.
We love you, Stewart. We love you, love you, love you. You know, you lost everything. You were the friend activist that came into my life. Like, everyone's pretty much lost everything. And the worst thing that we could ever lose is those that we love. That's the worst of the worst. But to lose your wife, to lose the love of your child, to lose your dogs who are like children, to lose the esteem that you fought for and worked for as a sheriff. You guys were the ones who you're the ones who we call when SHIT has gone down. Someone's at our door, someone's breaking in. You know, Roger, you know, our house is on fire. Roger's coming to help. You know, Stewart's coming to help. You are the epitome of the people. You know, we all need to be protected. But the people, the first responders are the ones that, good God, you guys are the ones who save us. And you may have lost everything, but I will tell you this, and you know this from our many conversations. You are my brother from another mother. You're a brother from another mother. For many of us, we are all together and we're all okay because of each other still and because we fight together. I don't know, you know, besides my husband, you know, and a few other people, like, you know, you have been here for me too.
I will
and
be.
I think for those, I mean, in a huge way, because you understand that I lost my second mom. You know that she's gone and she's dead and there's nothing I can do but fight. And I think for those who are watching this, who may not know what the conservatorship and guardianship battle is like, this is it. We just want our human rights, our civil rights, our constitutional rights. We want our ADA rights for our elderly and for ourselves when we end up, having problems, having PTSD or whatever may, go on with us, severe depression or whatever it may be. These are rights that we were told as we came up in this great country that were ours. We believe that when we get to this point, that these rights are for us and for our loved ones.
Correct.
And the problem is that we find out by the time we get to court, when we end up fighting for someone, they're not there for us. And all of a sudden, everything we believed in, the foundation we believed in, is totally broken down. And that is what happened in your case, Susan's case, Roger's case, Janice, and the tragedies that you've gone through, the court issues. Every single one of us that's listening to this, who's an activist, who's gone through it, this is what the problem is.
And
Well,
it continues, yeah, it does.
So I feel, I'm thankful for Janice, you putting all of this together, because we need to know that we are here for each other, that even though it seems like it's an underground movement, we're up here above the ground and we're standing up now even harder. And we will win. We will.
And we're
win.
speaking out. We're letting
Yes.
them know we're not going to take it anymore.
That's
That
right.
We aren't going to lay down, and we're going to hold them accountable. How we're going to do it, where we're going to do it, if it's through a grand jury where we get a special grand jury to investigate, we are taking back our country and leaving it to the next generation better than we found it, because that's what our parents were supposed to do for us. And they tried to.
They tried to.
There's a great line from a movie. You'll know this, Angelique, because you're in the entertainment business. Janice, you will too. It's a mantra line that I've been using for a long time, ever since this nightmare unfolded, both Roger and myself, and of course cost Susan her life. It's from a great movie, from a great actor who was awarded the Oscar for his performance posthumously. I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that's what we have to focus on. We may be separated by miles, Janice and Angelique, but we're locked in by spirit, and we're locked in by the motivation of God, and God drives us, and God will protect us. We have suffered losses, but because of those sufferings of losses, that makes us stronger in our efforts to expose the corruption, to identify these people that have done hurt to you, Janice, to done hurt to you, Angelique, to identify them, expose them, and take them down. And that is going to be my focus. I'm not going to be a law enforcement officer anymore, but what I'm going to be is an advocate for those who continue to be wronged by the legal system, which is totally out of whack, which needs to be dismantled and restructured immediately. And if President Trump gets back in office, and God willing, he does, then you'll see what happens to those bad people. You will see people go to prison. You'll see people suffer the pains of the justice system that they have exacerbated against you, Janice, and you, Angelique. And I will be there to witness it as well. And that's pretty much what I have to say to both of you lovely ladies on this 16th of May, 2024.
Well, I hope we do this again, because I'd like to keep people updated where you're at and everything. I'd like to read a quote by Robert F. Kennedy. Every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt, because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom and decency and justice.
Mr. Kennedy would have been a great president for this country. He was a very well-respected man, but he knew the bad players involved. And Janice?
And he was going to expose them. He was going to expose them.
And do you think for 1 minute, Yeah, you think for 1 minute that JFK Jr. didn't know who killed his father? Do you know who knew who killed JFK Jr.? I mean JFK Sr.? Richard Nixon knew who killed him. Richard Nixon was, now think about this for just a minute. Think about all the parameters involved in that assassination. And it ties into this corruption. And it was a great line spoken by Ted Kennedy at Robert F. Kennedy's funeral. His brother says, when they asked him why, and he goes, why not? Remember he said that? Why not? And that's what needs to be said for us. Why not? We will continue to fight. I may be fighting from a different geographical location, not so distant future, because and I've been very thankful for this lovely lady in Southern California to give me breathing exercises to control my PTSD, because within the last week I've had some severe episodes where my stuttering and stammering has prevented me from really talking a lot to people. But every time I get a chance, I take a deep breath. I focus on, as Happy Gilmore would say, my happy place. And Angelique Fawcette, you are a godsend. That's all I got to say. You have helped me so much. And I'm blessed with the friendship of both of you beautiful ladies. And I will continue to fight for whatever needs to be fought for. And I will not give up. Although some people wonder how I get from one day to the next, I get there with God and my friends and my family, and not necessarily in that order. I don't have much family anymore. I have my cousins. They're wonderful. Angelique knows about them. I got some great roommates here that cook for me just about every night. And I got a small cadre of friends, which of course includes the both of you. Janice, unfortunately, you're going to have to be part of the family. And like, not like the Corleone family, but part of the family. And Angelique is already part of my family. I'm looking forward to the day where
Likewise.
I get to meet both of you in person, give you both a big hug.
Well, we
Well,
love you so much too, Stewart. And can I just say one thing, Janice, that I have to lift my brother up.
Uh,
I know like the stress, the PTSD, and the breathing, and it hurts you, it comes, but I would love it if everyone could see what you said in court that day when you stood up for yourself and they released you, when Breslow released you and didn't send you to jail for standing up for the human and civil rights and constitutional rights of one of our elderly Americans. The way you stood up, everything that you said, it was so from the heart. It was everything that every single one of us wanted to say. So even if there's times when you stress, you bring it when you need to bring it, and you bring it for all of us. And we so appreciate it. And we all love you. Steve, my husband, loves you. My dogs already love you.
I love you all too.
So
if it wasn't for, like I said, Angelique, if it wasn't for you and Janice and our group, I wouldn't be here. And I have to thank that beautiful girl from Ohio, Ali Carino, for introducing both you and I. I want to thank you for introducing me to Janice. I believe there's going to be a compounding effort from that point forward. I'm never shy to speak my mind, as you well know. I never got a chance to speak it until March 20th. And God helped me that day. And so do my parents. So do my parents.
Well, I want to thank everybody for your time tonight and for sharing your story with us, Stewart. I'm looking forward, Angelique, to a time when we can talk about your story and what you've been through and the path that this has all taken you down on. None of it is easy. And God bless both of you. And thank you.
Both
Thank
of
you.
All right. Good night, ladies. Love you both.
Good night.
Okay. Good night.
Love you. Good night.
Okay. We're not recording now. It's off. So if you want to talk for a moment.
Oh, it's still recording.
Is it? Yeah, you're right.